Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining today, and welcome to the webinar. Does it have to be so complicated? Making sense of the ever-changing marketing measurement technology landscape. I'm Kristen Hamilton, Chief Marketing Officer at Marketing Evolution, and I'm going to be your host today for the webinar. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, we will answer a few of them at the end of the webinar. Please go ahead and type your questions into the question box that you see here. And if you're tweeting today, please use the hashtag MKTGROI I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Shane Desrochers. Shane is the Chief Revenue Officer with a difficult name to say, I might add, here at Marketing Evolution, responsible for global sales growth and revenue. Shane brings nearly 20 years of sales and sales management experience in the technology space and has over 15 years SaaS sales experience. Prior to joining Marketing Evolution, Shane was Vice President of Sales and Operations for Digital Commerce and Order Management for Aptos Retail. There he ran the sales, retention, product, and QA teams. Prior to that, his experience includes leadership roles at Shop Visible, which was acquired by Epicor, and Silverpop, a marketing automation and email marketing SaaS platform that was sold to IBM. So thanks again to Shane and to all of you for joining us. We're going to do our best to keep this under 45 minutes with the short Q&A at the end. The session will be recorded and shared with you via email. Please feel free to go ahead and ask those questions using that function that we showed earlier. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can at the end of the webinar. If we can't get to your questions on the call, we'll be sure to have one of our representatives follow up with you to answer those questions. So without further delay, let me hand it over to Shane.
Great, thanks, Kristen. So today we're really going to focus on the ever-changing marketing measurement landscape, which we'll dive into. Pros and cons of different approaches to measurement, going through MMM, MTA, and Unified. Supporting technologies for the ecosystem that make up the measurement space and ones that feed into the space itself. Really, what are the key levers to optimize your return on investment within your marketing and media, and how to remain focused on your goals. So many of you have seen this diagram through a ton of different webinars. So really looking at the 2019 MarTech landscape, which continues to grow and grow and grow. The number of tools that marketers have at their fingertips is more than ever. There's over 7,000 marketing tools that make this up. So realistically, it's a very complex space that continues to get more and more complex. So as we start to dive into certain areas of the MarTech landscape that make up your measurement and optimization ecosystem, we'll dive much, much further in. Really, when you think about this now, the marketing team itself is a consumer of more technology than any other department. The budgets within marketing now just are not focused on what is spent on data or overhead for team members, but that ecosystem of tools that are utilized in that team to manage all the different channels that they have. A great stat here is marketers now have an average of 91 different MarTech tools, right? So there's a lot of different tools that are out there that have very specific needs. And really, it can be complex because a lot of these needs and tools overlap where they sound very similar, right? So we're all buzzword out with, whether this is an AI, machine learning, is this a forward-looking tool, is this a reporting engine? There's a lot of different ways of looking at this ecosystem itself. As we start to narrow down a little bit more to look at the tools that come into play within the marketing and measurement ecosystem, it becomes a smaller puzzle, but still an extremely complex puzzle. You have really analytics, performance, and attribution tools. Some of these are very point solutions, so you may be measuring or optimizing a single channel. So example of that may be you're utilizing a web analytics tool, which yes is an analytics tool, yes it's a performance tool, and yes it is an optimization tool all in one for a single channel, right? So how do I better convert on my website? How do I serve up personal experiences on my website? And how do I know what's working and what's not working from an analytics standpoint on my website is one example. As you start to think of all the channels that are being utilized across the marketing teams today, like social, like email, direct mail, television, digital video, your ad tech, all of the different components all have these individual tools that are brought into place. Some of these tools have things like machine learning and AI in them, which are point solutions, right? They're optimizing amongst themselves. So this is performing very well, so serve up more of this. Where that starts to fall short is when I'm looking holistically at how media interplays with each other. So as an example, how does seeing a television ad play with seeing a digital display or a digital video or a billboard that I passed? How do those things come together? Hence, the marketing measurement landscape starts to coalesce around a unified view. As we start to look a little bit further out, and I'm going to kind of drop down now into the CRM bucket. So when you think of CRM, this is something that's been around for a long time. Started really heavily used by the sales teams, really. So as a contact management tool to start to outbound prospect, put notes in, create opportunities. As we think of that from a B2C standpoint, you tend to look at that as the interactions that you've had with that consumer, whether those are things like purchase information, call center log information, things like that. So it's a repository of your customer data that we'll dive into a little bit further. So when we think about these tools and we think about the sources of these, we start to think about how these feed into the overall attribution landscape and measurement landscape. So ultimately what I'm trying to do is decide, how do I effectively spend my marketing dollars? As an example, in 2018, $223 billion was spent in the US on media and advertisement, all trying to reach the same 300 plus million consumers, if we're just talking the US, that are in each of your CRM systems, whether those are current customers or prospects. So everyone's targeting the same individuals, spending billions of dollars to do this, and trying to find how effective I can be at getting someone to do X. When we think about that is, what is the purpose of your marketing and media? And that varies depending on the industries that you may be in. So as an example, if we think about an auto manufacturer, the goal of their media may be to get you to drive to a dealership and do a test drive. Good example, right? So it's unlikely that you're going to see an ad on television and buy a car without having understood the brand value proposition, and ultimately drive the car itself based off of the size of the purchase. Other things are much more transactional type buys where it's I need something and this is the best price. So commodity type purchases. So it may be a direct sale is the purpose of your media dollars. Then as we talk to marketers, and a lot of marketers really are spending a lot of time and focusing on their overall brand and how to increase things like brand awareness or brand favorability. Ultimately, if I don't favor a brand or I have a bad experience with the brand, I'm very unlikely to convert to an ultimate sale. So really looking at full funnel attribution. As we start to kind of pan around, then you start getting into data integration layers. So how do I take all this data from all these sources and start to pull it together? And this is where we get into middleware, which really allows you to ingest data in varying ways of disparate data to try to match it back to an individual that may be residing within your CRM system or your CDP. DMP, right? So if we're thinking of DMPs themselves, a way to target and reach some of these consumers that we're all coveting. And a CDP, which is really a combination of really looking at your CRM and then blowing that out a much more from a built-in integration layer. When we take a little bit of a step back and think about what are the problems we're trying to solve and what are we trying to do, first and foremost, right, is my marketing spend effective? The dollars that I'm spending, is it effective in achieving my goal, whatever that goal may be? Everyone has to answer for the budgets now more than ever. So if we think about the finance aspect, where a lot of you that live within marketing, some of it's reporting directly to finance, but of these dollars that I'm asking for and I'm spending, how effective am I at getting these people to convert to whatever my KPI is? Who should I target? You know, who am I looking to target, and how can I reach these individuals? Whether that is what mediums I can reach these individuals through. Which channel should I invest in to optimize my return on investment? So, you know, if I was, say, a traditional where I was doing a lot of TV direct mail, moving into digital, or I was truly an omni-channel and looking for which combinations of media is the most effective. So really starting to dive in and see where I should be spending my money through channels. But again, if we think about that, the channel is simply a container for a message. So as we dive one layer deeper, which messages are resonating with my audiences? So when I am serving content through a channel, which content to which audiences is most effective? How do I best allocate online versus offline? So what is the proper combination, right? So over the years, we've seen a heavy online optimization happening and less in the offline world. The reason that is because you tend to get a very strong signal from online, right? So I can do a direct path of someone, say, clicking on a banner ad, going to my website and purchasing. If I had an e-commerce site, for example, that last touch had a very strong signal. Now, what that signal isn't telling me is, was it a television commercial that made me love your brand? Or was it a social experience that made me love your brand more, that actually made me susceptible to that online ad that actually caused that conversion? Those are the things you're really trying to tease out when it comes to an effective measurement strategy. Brand activities influence my customer journey to the point I was making. So where am I spending on brand? How do I want my brand perceived in the marketplace? And how do I change perceptions of my brand through media? And how do I, of course, improve my results while my campaign is live? You know, the methods that we're going to go through, some of them are really relying on what has happened in the past to be a predictor of the future. And that's assuming that all the conditions are the same, whether those are economic conditions, whether those are brand conditions of your brand itself, price, promotion, economic conditions. There's many factors that go into why something was effective at a point in time versus how it will be effective now. Of course, you've got different channels that people can consume information through. You also have different media in the market at that time. So what do I need to solve these problems? Really what we're going to kind of dive into. Most of you understand the difference between first and third party data, but worth kind of setting the table, right? So first party data is content information that you've gathered, collected yourself, right? So register users on your website, actions that you're involved in, whether those are purchases, shared, on-site searches, reads, different indicators that you have that you're collecting through web analytics, you're collecting through different mechanisms that you know who did what within there. So that data, I'd say, depending on the customer that we're talking to or prospects that we may be talking to, really has, some people have their act together on this and have been doing this for a long time. Others, this may be in 2, 3, 4, 5 different solutions and they're bringing it together. So first party data has been being collected for a long time, 20 plus years, when you think about it. And where that's being stored, we'll kind of jump into a little bit later. Third party data, information or insights that are either purchased or acquired in bulk through aggregators, third parties, walled gardens. So this is data that resides within the ecosystem that you may or may not have access to. This could be demographic data, behavior, interest, intent, search history, impression data. So there's varying sources of this data. Some of this data can be purchased, where you can go out there and get it for your brand. So things like location-based data are things you can purchase. Some places you can purchase smart television data. Then there's data that really can't be purchased, like walled garden data, that you have access to via relationships within the space. A lot of this could be the relationships you have based off of your media buying power, right? You spend enough with a particular third party or walled garden that they're willing to give you access to that data itself in order for you to be a more effective marketer. So, what do the analysts say about the data? And how are we as a space doing with data itself? So, there is this strive internally, and most companies have now data science teams, analytics teams internally that have a lot of power and gaining a lot of power for many, many reasons, where having accurate data is extremely important. So, kind of first couple stats, 56% of all ad impression data are never seen by customers. So that results in over $37 billion digital marketing dollars wasted per year, right? These are huge numbers. Then if we bring it down to your individual organization, 15 million losses due to poor data quality per year. So data quality becomes extremely important. And 60% say improving data quality is a top priority. And really, if you kind of look at that across the industry, only 13% of marketers say that they're getting the most out of their data. This is for varying reasons. We're not talking about, small sets of data. For a lot of brands and companies, we're talking about billions of impressions. We're talking about thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of customers. We're talking about data from, hundreds of different sources being brought together. And so to get a complete view of the customer has been really a journey for as long as I've been in the space, and really as long as the space has existed itself from a data management standpoint. So we think about the goal, and what is the goal that every kind of customer wants. This really hasn't changed since I entered the space, right? Everybody wants a single view of their customer and prospect, so they know 360 everything they did of how to best speak with them and best target them on a one-on-one marketing. This isn't different. This hasn't changed. Now, the tools, the acronyms absolutely have changed through the years. And really, there's a lot of confusion of what do I need? How do I stack these things in order and to get the best we're looking for? So this really comes down to the right tool for the right job, right? So if we kind of just take a look at first-party data typically and where it may be stored, right? The first is CRM systems, and most companies are using a Salesforce, an Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, something, Sugar CRM. Somewhere in this world, there's more than likely a CRM in place of your organization. And really, what is it? It's your repository, your customer data, and transactional information. A lot of times that data is gathered manually. Although, of course, there's APIs now that you can feed different systems into it. Systems that tend to feed into it, things like call center activity, financial billing information, different information can be fed from different sources. Online and offline touch points, you can bring them in, but not from a touch point standpoint that you'd think from an online to really make it actionable, more of an activity of things that have happened. The goal is really to help salespeople and marketers sell more, communicate with their customers more effectively. Primary users tend to be sales, customer service, and marketing department for some outbound targeting from them. Then we get to a data warehouse, which is really kind of a catch-all generic term that a lot of companies have built data warehouses. A data warehouse tends to come into play when you're looking at enterprise data. So I'm looking at data from across the organization to get a 360 view of that customer. It may be every purchase that they had, their profile information. It tends to be much, much more detailed, where it needs to be customized based off of your business. So there's a lot of companies that made a living off of building data warehouses out for their customers. Axiom has done it, Epsilon has done it. A bunch of different companies go and focus in this area. I'm really looking for data from a bunch of legacy systems to be brought into a system where you can run analysis on that data and actually start to transform that, and so you can make sense of that data, typically through some sort of a BI layer on top of it in dashboarding. The users tend to be the IT teams, enterprise management, but individual dashboards can tend to be deployed for different teams. So I can have a CRM style dashboard, a marketing dashboard, a sales dashboard, a finance dashboard to really tease out information that may reside in here that I do. The problem with these is everything tends to be custom because all the data elements are unique to yourself. Then all these dashboards are unique. So every time you want to see a different cut or a different view, it tends to be more of an exercise of, is the data structured in a way that I can extract it out and view it this way? If not, then I need to go in and start to get IT support. More frequently, you've seen things come into the DMP world. And really, the purpose of a DMP is targeting ads, so improving media buying efficiency. So really looking at third-party data management, anonymized, so that I can actually get viable segments to go target. Really looking at different identifiers to be able to bring that data together. So you've got things like cookie IDs, you've got digital identifiers, you've got mobile IDs. So identity management solutions to start to pull these things together. Your data retention is not meant to be a repository forever because the idea is you're looking for who you can target from a media standpoint, and so that's constantly changing. The idea behind it is to really make the data actionable so that you can put the right ads in front of what you believe to be a susceptible audience to those ads themselves through channels that they consume it through. Primary users are, of course, your marketing and media team. Then kind of all the way to the far right, we're getting to CDPs. So CDPs and CRMs to a lot of companies will sound familiar. So as an example, a lot of companies don't have their own DMP. More and more those are coming online. So it's not like where I'd see a CRM or data warehouse, I'd say it's probably a 95 to 100% coverage, or where organizations of a certain size all have one of these two in place. When you get to the DMP and CDP, you start to see those numbers dwindle dramatically. At the DMP side, you really are seeing that for people that are heavy into digital, do a lot of buyable segments in a conversion transaction type of a world, you'll see have DMPs in place and use them fairly effectively. A CDP really is your kind of replacement for a CRM in some aspects, where you're integrating and taking action system into your ad tech stack. So really pulling in more information than you typically store in a CRM through a bunch of automated integrations that are out there. So you're really taking in first-party data management with some third-party data, but really not necessarily a prospecting tool like a DMP. Identifiers tend to be actual PII information. So you know things about them, like who they are, what's their name, where they live, similar to what we'd see in our CRM system. Data retention tends to be long, right? So you want the history within these systems going back as far as you can keep it and retain it for, because it helps inform the future. The idea behind it is based off of all this information that you know, to be able to deliver more relevant advertising to prospects and customers through personalizing website, personalizing email are the two main use cases you tend to see in the space today. Now, there's many use cases that this can be used for, but if you were to kind of boil it down, in the most use cases that we tend to hear tend to be for those two main reasons, which is website personalization and email personalization. The first thing you're saying is, we already have tools that do this today. And yes, that is true. But most of those tools are utilizing information that they know based off the visit, as opposed to utilizing all of the information that you know about that customer. So I know everything that they've ever purchased. I know their profile. I know what stores they visited. I know a bunch of information about them that I can make those email, website, banners, ads, pages, products that I put in front of them much more effective. And that's the goal behind it. So clients that have CDPs or prospects that have CDPs is a much narrower audience as well. I'd say across the space of what we're seeing is, 15 to 20% penetration of truly having a CDP. And a lot of times when we see a CDP in place, it's not much more on a CRM. The idea behind all of these tools, and where we're really focusing on, is it's only as good as the data that they're getting fed and how that data is being utilized. So it's not like you need all these tools within your stack. the first thing you should start with is, what am I trying to solve? And based off of what I'm trying to solve, what is the right tool for the right job, right? So if I am really trying to expand and do heavy targeting, a DMP makes sense. If I have a outbound sales team that is a high touch type of a sale process, then a CRM makes total sense. If I'm really kind of more pushing the envelope and going to that next generation where I want to have truly one-to-one personal experiences, then I'm going to start to push towards a CDP, right? Or again, if my business is just so unique that packaged software doesn't seem to fit it, then I start to get into the data warehouse world. So now that we think about all the data sources, right? So why did I bother to go through the different tools that are in place? So when you think about measurement and first-party and third-party data, well, the consumer of a lot of that data that you have internally will be your measurement solution. So your measurement solution is going to be taking in both first-party and third-party data to inform how effective your marketing and media is. So there's a couple different pieces that have been on the market for a long time, right? So you have marketing mix modeling, MMM. Most companies have done this on an ongoing basis, or at least at some point within their history. This originally came out of the CPG space. So when you see people with deep background in marketing mix models, it's almost always that they had come somewhere out of the CPG space, because this is where it was invented, mostly to bring in to find out how effective their marketing spend is at the end sale. Now, really the goal of it is to assess the value of marketing, so contribution. So what it does do is allows you to say through methodology that this media contributed X to the bottom line. It also allows you to plan and allocate budget, usually for the following year, based off of price, promotion, all the P's you're bringing into it. The results come out as revenue by channel and some recommendations by channel. So pros measurement impacts aggregate sales, takes internal and external factors into account, which is extremely important. So what's going on in the economy, qualifies value or quantifies value for your brand itself. The cons are it's not very actionable for a marketing team. So it's slower. It tends to be done either annually, twice a year with clients. So the action is looking at a window that already passed, so you can't really take action going forward. Then the insights you're gaining out of it are not super informative. So as an example, it may say, hey, TV's been highly effective for you, so go do more TV. Now, we all know as marketers that you just don't go and do more TV. It's well, which channels, which day parts, OTT versus traditional. What are the different media? Was it 15-second spots? Was it 30-second spots? Was it brand messaging versus promotional messaging? It doesn't give you that level of granularity that you're looking for. The other thing that it tends to do is it averages all customers' behaviors, typically by zip code or DMA or store location, depending how it's grouped. So ultimately what it's saying is that everyone in a certain area behaves similarly, right? And so we know as marketers that isn't true, right? So someone can live in the same neighborhood with you, have a similar cars in the driveway, have similar paying jobs, but what would tell you what kind of music in that signal that I would like versus my neighbor who may like country and I may like hard rock, right? As an example. So they're not necessarily the signals that you may be looking for from a targeting standpoint. Requires significant time series data. So all the data has to be put into time segments in order to make sense of that, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, it needs to be within that cadence. Also, there is no ability to optimize in campaign. You're looking at results of things that already happened. So fast forward, we get to multi-touch attribution, right? So MTA. So MTA, the goal is really to look at your digital spend and optimize your digital spend. So the goal is to assess the value of specific tasks, program level budget recommendations, so getting granular, customer purchase path, so looking at journey. So your results are granular reporting for your dollar analysis, your user level optimization, so getting down into which placements are effective, getting into which segments those are effective with. So if you spent 100% of your money in digital, this is a very good solution for you, because it's basically saying, here's how effective your digital media spend has been. So really looking at where it really strives is measuring the impact of singular customer actions. So if you have a very strong signal, like you're an e-commerce site, tends to be a really good signal for you, right? So they saw this ad, they did this search, they then converted and they bought this pair of shoes. Straight path, fully understood, excellent at that. Calculate short-term impact in near real time, because again, it's digital data, so it's consuming it very frequently. And it allocates revenue by channel, so different tactics that you may be using. The cons of it is it almost exclusively optimizes to acquisition. So it's all about not brand building, but simply converting. Some businesses, again, it makes total sense. If you're more of an omni-channel business or have longer term goals, cross-sell, upsell, or if you have to do brand building and multiple touch points, it tends to be limiting. Requires cookie data, so it's doing a lot of cookie data with obviously what's going on with browsers. That can be challenging. Limited brand insight, so it's not giving you the true impact of your brand, and no offline media, no in-campaign optimization for any of that offline media. So then we get to kind of a unified view, and I'll kind of tell you what unified is not to kind of start off with. So a lot of times you'll hear, well, I'm running an MMA and I'm doing some MTA stuff. And really what's happening is they're trying to force those two different methodologies together to try to get an answer for a unified marketing measurement, which it is not. So to kind of get a little bit more granular of how that works, right? So taking MMM and running it and say 15% of my marketing contribution is coming from digital. Then taking that 15%, forcing it into the MTA now, and then optimizing that 15% only. So kind of just taking, a simple analogy of phones, me taking a typical rotary phone with, a BlackBerry doesn't equal today's smartphone, right? So you need an approach from a methodology, technology, and data sources that actually are for today's problem, which is really unified. Ultimately, unified is blending of data technology analytics for overall marketing performance. Concept is pretty simple from a standpoint, obviously difficult in execution, but from the concept standpoint, right, is you're taking in person level data and mapping it back to an individual for all of the entire universe from all of their media impressions. So I'm taking in things like smart television data. I'm taking in DMP, DSP segments. I'm taking in ad server logs, mobile server logs. I'm taking in your web analytics logs. I'm taking in your CRM, transactions, conversions. I'm taking in all of your brand panel data, so favorability, awareness, etc. I'm taking in location-based data. Then I'm taking in aggregate level data, such as weather, economic conditions, and those sorts of things, and applying it down. Ultimately, to get to a point, and so the kind of glue in the middle of that is an identity management solution, which for those of you who are not familiar, ultimately allows you to link online and offline data together so that I can get a 360 view of an individual. Then you're taking that data together, aligning that data, and really normalizing that data so that you're getting a single view of a customer, modeling on that data to then really get your actual model out of it, which is your optimization itself. So when you think about doing this at the person level and really why it matters, each individual is exposed to hundreds of paid advertisements per day through varying sources. What you're trying to answer through this methodology is getting back to our original point, right? So it's how effective is my media spend? Who do I target? Which channels should I invest in? Which messages resonate with which audiences? How do I allocate both online and offline spend? How do my brand activities influence my customer journey? And what can I do to improve my results while my campaign is live? Ultimately, that's what we're producing in a unified measurement. So to dive a little bit further into that, as you take your first party, third party data, and you start to dive into a little bit more, right? We start to look at household data. So we start to look at like Experian or Acxiom backbone data that has a bunch of public information that we can start to map these individuals to. So I can get their age, I can get their gender, I can get a bunch of information that allows me to target. Now, this is all anonymized within the system through an ID that you can't basically convert back to basically resolving it to them. But I know tons of information now that I've mapped all the media to it. Location-based data, smart television data, brand data, pulling all these things together to get a 360 view of your customer. And more importantly, your prospects, so who is your next best customer? Once I have these things pulled together, really what I'm looking at doing are these really three buckets: media mix, creative rotation, and segmentation. So these are the levers you have for your optimization. So what makes me most effective? So if I kind of look at my media mix, right? This looks very similar to what someone may see through a mixed model to kind of start off at a high level, which is, hey, great, here's my current spend levels through my media plan that I'm spending on social media, search, out-of-home, mobile, etc. As I actually look to optimize this for a particular KPI, what is the most effective way to optimize this? So if we look at this, it's telling me, great, you should move more into search, move more into social, you should pull back on your out-of-home, etc. Now, this information alone isn't super actionable other than you could guess of where to spend this money. As I start to dive deeper into these, I start to look at the creative rotation for each of these individual channels. So as an example, if I were to take the slice of the pie that is local television, it's telling me that, hey, currently here's how you're serving up the creative that you have served up to these channels. It's going to tell me which channels are effective, which day parts are effective, and which actual creative is working. So when we think about that mix, right, the levers that we have in front of us are the channel that I'm delivering it through, the creative that's being pushed through that channel, and the audience that's viewing it. So if I change any one of those three, I would get a different result every time. So by looking at which channel is effective with which audiences, which creative is effective with which audiences, and reversing that of which audiences are more adept to this type of creative, which audiences consume through these channels, I get that 360 view of what is my overall high-level media mix, what is my creative rotation, and then jumping into what are the micro segments that I can target within here that index higher. So really through looking at partial attribution of knowing that it's very rarely a single touch point that causes someone to convert, and it's the totality of your brand plus your media that's actually equaling a purchase or a conversion of some type. Knowing that and keeping those things together, this will truly help me target and optimize my media that I have. So in summary, right, ignore all the technology options, right? So don't start with I'm buying a technology, or I'm buying a DMP, I'm buying a measurement tool, I'm buying whatever it may be. Start with a much more important question is, what are you trying to solve? What is your business problem? And then what are the right tools for that? Really identify your current marketing technology stack. So what are the sources of the data that you may have internally? And then what are the sources of the data that may not reside within your walls? Conduct a data audit, really. Is this data brought together anywhere in the company? Is there a project going on to unify this data? If not, do I even need it unified in this way, depending on the questions that I'm trying to answer? or do I unify that within, say, a particular measurement tool itself? It's my earlier point of what do you want to achieve, really? What are the goals of what are you measuring for? For some clients, it could simply be, hey, finance needs me to justify my $200 million media spend. So the purpose of this is simply, I want marketing attribution and contribution to be defined, and I want it defined by channel. That's a totally valid. I would say that, hey, the next question that if I was a CFO, I'd ask is, okay, great. How do you get more out of each of those channels? Which drives you into the next, which is now how do I have this information at a granular enough level that I actually can take action on it and I actually can improve the efficiency of my media dollars. Determine the complementary data to drive accuracy, right? So to the point of what is that data that's in the market and do I need that, whether that's location-based data, right? So pick on, say, quick serve restaurants tend to have a hard time getting CRM data because most people, 50% of their audience may pay with cash. The others have no loyalty program, so you really don't have a ton of information to kind of match back on them, maybe credit cards, some other options. But is location-based data, because I have standalone stores, a good proxy for sales that may make sense for me to measure to of, is my media driving them to visit stores? Great. Then, of course, select the right measurement approach based off of your needs. For kind of quick and dirty aggregated, MMM is fine if you're just looking to kind of do a one-time measurement, makes sense. If you're digital only, MTA probably makes the most sense for you. But if you're omni-channel, if you care about your effects and are investing in brand, if you have multiple KPIs, if you need actionability to that data, then obviously a unified approach is by far the most effective. Any questions at all as I'm kind of wrapping up? Kristen will take over to kind of ask any questions that are rolling in.
Thanks, Shane. Wow, it's a complicated space. You did a great job. While you were talking, I was trying to figure out how many tools I have in my stack. Not quite 91, but close. Let's see. So I'm just looking at the clock here. We probably have a little less than 5 minutes. Let's see if we can get through a few questions. Here's the first one. Do I need a CDP or DMP to measure and optimize my marketing?
Yeah, so it's very common that customers and prospects will kind of stack things in place. So they're kind of looking for the perfect world before they bother to measure and optimize anything. So the quick answer to that is absolutely not, meaning that these sources of data do not need to be unified in a tool that you're controlling internally. They can be unified in, say, a measurement platform itself. This is what companies like Marketing Evolution do. So you can bring those things together while you may be standing up a CDP or a DMP. Ultimately, it's not a dependency, which becomes extremely important because if you think about it, right, a lot of our clients will have hundreds of millions of dollars in media in play, and they're waiting to get to this point, or not our clients, but say a prospect is waiting to get to this point to get to this perfect world of data before they bother to start to look at how effective their media spend is, which when you think about that logically is crazy because marketers have been trying to get to a perfect one-on-one customer database for 20 plus years, and we're never going to get to the state of perfect. It's what are the best data sources you have to start to look at that, to optimize that now as opposed to waiting. Okay.
The not boil the ocean approach, or right? Okay. Here's a good one. What are your customers typically measuring and optimizing to?
Yeah, so it depends on, so the first question you have, which is really what is the purpose of your media? So this is a question that I ask, every marketer that I ever talk to, where it is, what is the goal of your media? Is the goal of your media to get me to go to your e-commerce site and purchase something? Is it to get me to visit one of your stores? Is it for you to download more information about us? Is it for you to go talk to an insurance agent? So it varies across. Is it to build brand awareness? Maybe it's a newer brand or a new product line that people aren't aware of that you need to educate educate the world on. So you tend to see one level of a sales KPI, and typically some sort of a upper funnel brand KPI would be the funnel that most people would look for. So really what we tend to focus on is full funnel attribution, because ultimately we want to optimize the lower funnel for direct conversion to sales, along with that next set of customers for the upper funnel simultaneously.
Okay. We have about a minute left. Let's try to squeeze one more in. Let me pick one. Let me pick a good one. Okay, here. What industries tend to have first-party and third-party data most effectively? I don't know if that means use them most effectively, or I'll read it again. What industries tend to have first-party and third-party data most effectively? Did you get that?
So I think the question is, of the industries, who's kind of leading the space with really the data consolidation. Some spaces have a huge advantage in industries because they know who their end customer is. So if I kind of were to pick on two, financial services and insurance know who every one of their clients is, because you have to sign up with them in order to get insurance. Therefore, they know a lot of information about you. If I were to contrast that with, say, a CPG, like say a Coke or a like a Bounty paper towel, something like that, they have a more difficult time because they are sold through third parties. So a couple of things that you see, like if you were to pick on the retail industry, they were pretty smart. Most of them now have a chief customer officer. Why does that matter? Because at most organizations, historically, you had taken online and offline and split it, and there were two departments that ran completely separately within the organization. Having that chief customer officer consolidates and says, listen, I don't care where they buy from us. I just care that we are effectively communicating with them through all the different channels that we have. So they tend to have their data organized in a structural way that is more like how a consumer looks at you as a brand, as opposed to how you look at a consumer, aka do they purchase through me online, do they purchase through me offline, etc. So I would say that, to directly answer, when you know who your customer is, you have a leg up over other industries. So think of travel, financial services, retail, tend to do any of the apps. They tend to do very well with a measurement standpoint because they have granular information about their customers, at least from a conversion standpoint.
Okay, well, great. I think we're just about 30 seconds over, pretty good. So I'd like to thank you to Shane for being our speaker today, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be following up with the recording in the next day or two. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and thanks again.
Good. Thank you.